Okay, so how do we write explicit equations for arithmetic patterns or sequences? Well, you need two things. The first thing you need to identify is what is the first term, or sometimes we call this the a sub 1 of your sequence or pattern. And this is usually pretty easy for us to pick out as long as it's given to us. And in this case, you can see that the first term here, or the number of blocks from a well-known video game, would be 3. The second thing you need to be able to identify is what is the common difference. Now, the common difference for arithmetic patterns is the number that you're adding repeatedly or subtracting repeatedly. And remember, subtraction is just the addition of a negative number. Now, in this case, it definitely looks like it's increasing. And I can see those initial 3 blocks that we started with here, and then it looks like we got 2 more. And then our initial 3 here, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, actually, let's build it off of the one before that. So the one before that had these 4, and then that one, so it also added 2. And then, oof, this is getting into a really weird looking shape. Right? So it seems like it might, I'm overcomplicating this. It seems like the new parts each time are just kind of making this L-shaped pattern, right? These two, and these 2. So that means that we have an increase of 2 each time, which means that our common difference is 2. So then how does this help us write our explicit equation? Well, our explicit equation comes in the form of a sub n equals the first term plus the common difference times n minus 1. And in this case, we just stated that our first term was 3. That's what we start with. And each time to add, or what we add to get to the next part of the pattern, is a plus 2. And then the n minus 1 stays there because that's kind of like our equation part that we'll use to substitute in a specific term value later on. And so that would be it. That would be your equation for this particular pattern. Now let's say I give you a list of numbers instead of pictures. We're going to do the same steps. The first thing we need to identify is what's our initial term, our a sub 1. And in this case, it looks like that's going to be negative 11. So that's where we're starting. And then what we're doing each time, now that takes a little bit more thinking usually. So in this case, be careful because you see negative numbers, so you might think subtraction. But if you look further along in the pattern, these are getting less negative into the positive. So that means we're actually adding something repeatedly. So in this case, if you're having a hard time in the negatives and you have an option of looking at positives, maybe start there, because I can go from 3 to 10 in my head and think that's plus 7. But doing that from negative 11 to negative 4 is a little bit more challenging. So what we're actually doing every single time is we're adding 7. Okay, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to try to use colors this time. Okay, so if I come down here and I write my equation, it's going to be my first term, which in this case is negative 11, plus my common difference, which is 7, and minus 1 times. And again, the reason it's n minus 1 instead of just like a regular n is because we're starting at term 1 and not term 0. All right, the last way you might see this is with a recursive sequence. And recursive just means that it's the easy pattern we can identify pretty quickly. Like if I give you this list of numbers, it's what we did here where we said it starts like this and then it adds this. It's just not as efficient though if I ask you like what's the 80th term, all you're going to know is to start with this number and subtract 4 a lot. And we don't really want to have to do it over and over again. So again, what we've been writing are the explicit formulas. Okay. And that's, again, telling me what's my first term. Well, in this case, my first term is negative 22. And the reason I know that is because it has a little 1 here. And what I'm adding each time repeatedly is going to always be located at this part of the setup. whatever comes after the a sub n minus 1. This is just fancy notation that says to get the next term, take the 1 that comes before it and subtract 4. Now, I always have students ask, do I write plus negative 4 or do I write minus 4? I don't particularly care if you write it this way with the plus negative, but on a multiple choice test, they're going to simplify that to just minus 4 and minus 1 times. And that's how you're going to write the explicit formulas.